The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you.
Hello, and welcome once again to the FrankenCast. I'm the mad scientist, Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always by...
your friendly video game YouTuber, that is Eric Velasquez. My pronouns are he, him as well. And oh, wait a second. I'm not a video game YouTuber, but I think we have one.
Oh, do we now?
I think so.
Oh, hello.
Hey.
It's me. The name Victor has been ruined by a certain mad scientist, so you can just call me Vic.
Yeah, so we mentioned last week, so you've got your YouTube channel, NoiseLandCo, where you do sort of like, this is kind of your thing, right? You do like big deep dives into like I think Simpsons
series,
was your first sort of like main thing that you did, right?
Yeah, my thing is, I just remember that one TV show I watched 30 years ago, and I decide to look up if it has video games, and when it does, I play them all the way through, and then I talk about them a whole bunch as well. So it's talking and playing as I go.
Awesome.
That's really cool. Yeah, I saw you have a book as well. I have not gotten to read it yet, but I am definitely going to. It looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, do you want to plug that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a book I titled Bart versus My Hopes and Dreams. And that is also this thing where, like, decades ago, I was like, why doesn't this book exist? I want to read about Simpsons video games. Surely someone else does. But 20 years passed, no one else did it. So I just thought, you know what? It's time to just get this done. So, yeah, I just wrote a book where I wrote about my experiences with these games, and then I just wrote about the games in general for the world, for whoever wants to read about it.
That's really
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're doing this series right now, October, Halloween season, and everything. What made you go with? We often ask our guests this: why Frankenstein? So what made you seek out Frankenstein games as opposed to Dracula games or some other monster?
Well, I love all monsters. I'll gladly explore them all over time if I can. But in this case, it was because each license or each franchise that I pick, initially it was just stuff I knew. But then I realized I should probably branch out just because there's a lot more to explore if I look for different origins, I guess. Because, for example, I looked at the books of Dan Brown. So I looked at kind of games based on a book series. And I've certainly looked at cartoon shows like The Simpsons, or an anime series called Dr. Slump, which was a manga, I think, at first, from Akira Toriyama. And in this case, I thought, I need to look at video games based on something created by a woman, where that is the source. And I looked around, and I realized, if I want enough games to talk about, it's going to have to be Barbie, created by Ruth Handler, or it's going to have to be something like Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So I went with Frankenstein because there are less games. Yeah, so even though there are a lot of games based on Frankenstein, I think Barbie has got to be in the hundreds. It's just a ridiculous... Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of Barbie out there in the world.
Right, no doubt. So you do start off every one of these videos with a quote from Frankenstein. So, what are your thoughts on the novel altogether?
Oh, it's a great book. I mean, I read it. I read it embarrassingly kind of recently. It was for I've been taking community college classes for years and years. I must have read that book I don't know. I guess it's been a decade. But I didn't read it in high school. I didn't read it when I was younger. So I did read it at some point, and then I reread it as part of this series, and it's good. It's bleak. I think I didn't realize this when I picked those quotes for those videos, but they're grim. The people in this book. My conclusion was man, people in this book are miserable. No one's having a good time. Across the board.
It's pretty accurate.
The creator, the creature, creator's family are all kind of getting it. It's just, it's a rough book. But it's good. It's good. It's philosophical, of course. It gets you thinking about life and existence and what does it mean to be. So it's all worth it. But yeah, it's pretty grim there.
Yeah, it's. I feel like a lot of people are, they're familiar with, the story through movies and stuff, and the book is its own separate animal. There's obviously some similarities in some of the basic plot structure stuff, but Mary Shelley definitely was she had a lot of an agenda that kind of got boiled out of some of the adaptations that are the most commonly viewed ones.
Yeah, it was cool. I don't know if you all have gotten into any of the stage plays that were happening, because I realized, in my pop culture memory, there's a big gap for this between like the book and then the first movies. That's like a century or more.
Yeah.
And I finally realized there was no way that was just a vacuum. There must have been something happening, and that's when I discovered that there have just been like a bunch of stage plays, pre-TV, the stuff happening before television was available or film was available.
Right.
So it was cool to really fill in that blank for myself, at least. Like, oh yeah, there was a lot happening in that valley between like the big things that most people would know about. So it was cool to see or to learn that like the stage plays really were where the movies were pulling from. It's not that they're obviously the book is in there, but they're really more pulling from these stage play adaptations they had been watching, I guess.
Yeah, that's where Igor came from, right? From the stage play.
Oh yeah. But also the stuff like the idea of like not peripherals, like the idea of like a science lab with like contraptions and stuff littered about, just to kind of give it place, provide a setting. Like apparently that came from the stage plays as well. So that was all great to discover as part of the process.
Yeah.
So you've been watching a lot of the movies as well as part of all this?
Oh boy, did I jotted them down because that's another part of this too, is I have an awful memory. So part of making the videos is I got it out of my brain, and now I won't feel as bad that I just forgot it, because at least I recorded it somewhere. But I watched over a dozen movies for sure, like as just as part of this project, but also as part of like I wanted to listen to your podcast, because I've been subscribed for years and years.
Thank you.
But I had the experience that a previous guest you had noted how the moment they discovered somebody was just doing a podcast just about this, it was like insta subscribe, and that's what I did. So I subscribed, and I was like, oh yeah, at some point I need to watch these movies or some of these so I can listen to the show. Because before this, I think I'd watched, like, I don't know, maybe less than a handful of Frankenstein movies. So suddenly, it was just like a torrent of Frankenstein into my brain. Yeah.
So what's your favorite? Can I ask?
Oh, the anime one. What was it called? Kyofu Densetsu Kaiki Frankenstein. That one was really shockingly good. I was just like overwhelmed by like what they achieved, and the fact that they like overtly get into like the Christianity aspect. The fact that he's praying in a church, right? That happens.
Yes.
It's like, whoa, they're doing it. So that one was cool.
Yeah, that is one of my favorites as well. That's one that I often like recommend to people who are like, what's something a little bit further off the beaten path that I haven't seen? Because it's like not available in America in any kind of like official release. It's just like out there on YouTube or whatever. But it's such a shame that it's not more widely seen, because it's such a unique take.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I know a lot of animation nerds, and I've just been asking them like, have you watched this? Because if you have not, like, you're missing out. And it seems like I don't know if it got it might have gotten an English release or like an Italian release or something, but it is definitely something like none of us were talking about when, like among my friends anyway.
Mm-hmm. You said you watched a dozen or so as part of prepping for the series. What else did you watch?
Yeah.
Oh boy, let's see. Well, I had to watch that Edison short from 1910, or Edison produced short directed by, who was it? J. Searle Dawley. That was interesting. I like their take on the monster. It's just kind of like a woolly wig thing going on. That was cool. I saw a really good, like, I don't know if it was a figure, but it was certainly a model somebody made based on that version of Frankenstein, but it was in color.
Okay.
So it was, and that film is in black and white, so it was a cool way to like think about what it would have been like to stand there on set with this actor with this crazy getup on. So that one was cool.
That's awesome.
What else was wild? The one where Frankenstein is a woman, like Lady Frankenstein by Mel Wells from '71. I think that would have been that one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Only because I like gender flips, and I like messing with established gender of characters. So I appreciated that they were like, no, let's switch this around a little bit, you know. Also, let's make her completely malevolent and horny.
Yeah.
Interesting as well.
I really did appreciate that too, because I mean, you know, having so many male Frankensteins, and especially the ones where they make female creatures, and it's, you know, there's kind of like a, they're very horny, and it's, you know, I'm making my perfect woman, you know, like Frankenhooker or whatever, those kind of movies. Right. But it is really nice to have that flipped and have her making this like perfect man figure.
Yeah. One more I'll note. I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't seen Rocky Horror Picture Show, and this is when I finally did watch that, and it's right to the top of my favorite movie list.
There you go. All right, so out of everything, out of all the games you've played, what is your favorite so far?
Oh man, so I played 85 games as part of this whole thing. By the end of it, all the videos, it'll be 85 games. But in the final video, I did kind of make a top 10, because I realized, like, well, one, people will ask what you just asked. Like, okay, well, that's a lot of games. What's good among that? So yeah, I jotted down a top 10. My number one, I guess the game that if I was to say play this one, it's a game called The Frankenstein Wars from 2017. It is a weird one because it's a mobile game, and it might not be available anymore. Like, it was on iOS, it was on Android, but it's in that situation where games get delisted, they get incompatible. So, should I recommend it? I'll say yes. Oh, regardless of whether it's available, that was the top one. It's an interesting game where it's like an interactive fiction story where the player is reading for a little bit and then you're making a choice. So it's like, all right, well, hey, do you take left door or right door? You make a choice, and the story plays out based on that. Characters live or die based on your choices. So, yeah, it's really well done. They incorporated war into it pretty effectively. Like, you wouldn't think you could like set up like a successful combat gameplay setup in that kind of situation, but they do it. Like, you're making choices like, all right, do you send your soldiers left or right? Do you stay here? Do you rush forward? That kind of stuff. So, yeah, it was really impressive. The Frankenstein Wars, 2017.
Okay.
So, I mean, I asked for the best. So now I've got to ask, what's the absolute worst? The one you would say stay away from?
Oh, well, here's the thing. I really went wide with my searching. And the reason I found 85 games, or that many, is I went on itch.io. And I don't know if you're familiar with this website, but it's a storefront where anybody can publish anything they want. As vaguely video game related, if it's vaguely a game, you can put it on there. There's no barrier, really, which is good for democratic reasons. Like, yeah, anyone can make a game, anyone can publish it online and share it, so that's good. But it means you get a lot of stuff that's like, just sometimes barely a game. Oh man, can I name the bottom of the... What can I name that's the least favorite? I'll say this. Any game that wasn't a game. There were a lot of people who tried to get really avant-garde, and they really just make a slideshow sometimes. Like, they present you like a creepy image, and then your only interactivity is to just press a button to advance to next scene. It's effectively a slideshow. So I can't name them. I don't have like... I didn't grab my like worst games list, but yeah, any game that was like that was rough. Or rather, I played them for a few minutes and it was like, all right, that's not really a game. Right. So we're gonna just zoom past this one, move on to the next.
Fair enough. Do you have like a middle of the road, like your average game that you would say your most average?
Oh, there were games I wanted to love. Like, there's a game called The Adventures of Dr. Franken. It's a 16-bit game from the SNES era. And it's like a side-scrolling platformer. So you're jumping, you're like doing like kicks and punches. But the reason I call this game out is because there's this episode of a show called Bob's Burgers. It's an animated show, and it was a Halloween episode where one of the characters is told, put on this summer Frankenstein costume, and it's a Frankenstein monster, but with sunglasses and a Hawaiian shirt and like shorts. Right. and he doesn't end up wearing it, but the idea of Summer Frankenstein stuck in my head, and the main character in this game is that. It is Summer Frankenstein, and you play as this character, and it's a game that I always had in my brain as like, or certainly at the start of the series, I had that in my head as like, oh yeah, that one Summer Frankenstein game. I bet it's going to be fun. I don't know if it's fun. It's certainly playable. It certainly looks really nice. Like, so many of these games, or so many games in general, like the artists clearly like were really punching above their weight class. They're like really putting out some great animation, great art, and then the gameplay is just like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's a functional game that I can complete from start to finish. So yeah, games like that, like The Adventures of Dr. Frankenstein, or Dr. Franken rather, they're just kind of in the middle. Like, yeah, it's a game, and I guess I guess maybe I could enjoy it if I tried. Similarly to that is a game called Decap Attack. You all remember this on the Sega Genesis?
Yep.
It's a this one's more vaguely Frankenstein connected, but like the creator of this creature that you play as is, I think, a Dr. Frankenstein. Literally, I think that's what they name him. But yeah, this is a game where you play as like a mummy who can shoot out its guts as the attack, and it's headless, so you have to find a head somewhere to put onto the body. And it looks amazing and it looks fun, but then you play it and it's just kind of like mediocre. So yeah, so some games like that definitely pop up where it's like, if I was a 10-year-old and I was stuck with this game for 3 months because my parents wouldn't buy me anything else,
right.
I think I could enjoy it. But because I had 85 of these, and I put a hard limit at like 10, because those 10 games that I selected were the games that I thought I want to go back and continue playing this game. So that's what the top 10 were. It was just me deciding that this is the subset of games where I was intrigued enough that I want to go back and play them all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, one thing that's like good and bad about sort of the modern world is that everything is right at our fingertips, and sometimes it like prevents you from really spending the time, like you know, like you were saying with video games, or like I remember, you know, being a teenager and like I bought a CD and it was like, this is it for like, you know, until I can get to the record store again. So like I'm gonna just wear it out, and you when you give something a chance, it does start to click more. But there are, you know, of course, you know, some of these older games that, you know, they may not have merit no matter how much time you spend with them.
Right.
I've caught up. So I guess you know, recording this today, you're up to like day 8 on or day 9. Because October 9th.
I think so. Yes.
And so I've caught up with all of them that you've done so far, and like, yeah, I was surprised a lot of these games like that you wander around for a while, and you can't find what you're supposed to do, and like. You know, maybe if you had bought this in the case and it had like the little booklet or whatever, there might have been a little bit more information. But like, one of the ones I think it was in today's episode or yesterday's, where you like wandered around forever and you like never found. You're the creature trying to collect body parts, or you're Igor trying to collect body parts, and you never found the doctor to give them to him, and it was like, well, that's frustrating. Like,
yeah, it's frustrating to play. I'm sure it's frustrating to watch. That's one angle on making game videos is I am always conscious of the idea that like, so this whole process is different because usually I've played these games all the way through before I make a video about them. The Frankenstein games, there were so many that I just decided like, we're just going to play these relatively blind. Like I haven't just go in and discover on camera, you know, what is this game? And yeah, sometimes that's the experience. It's just, yeah, you're trying to figure it out, and it's not making itself clear. The games that stand out the most in that regard are those old text adventures where there's a parser, and it wants you to type very specific words, but they have not explained what those words are. And I think one of those games that I played, I never left the room. I start off in like a room in the Frankenstein castle, and the part, you know, I'm typing in words desperately trying to like get past this room, and it wouldn't accept the words. So yeah, sometimes. Yeah, it's like I said, like if in a time and place when that's all you had, you could make it happen. You can make it work and play through.
Right.
But nowadays, like you said, because there's so much available, like I think maybe this applies to all media, like books and everything else. When you're like the idea that like you can say no, you can just close the book, or you can just turn off the game or shut down the game and say like, I think that's all I need to know about this experience. I'll just move on to something else.
Right.
And yeah, unfortunately, well, I guess understandably, with so many games in the mix here, some of them are like that. They're just like, oh, that's all I need to know about Castle Frankenstein 84 or whatever game is being difficult.
Yeah. So you have already, like, you're done. Even that we're at day 9. Like you've recorded all the episodes. You've played all the games at this point.
Yeah, not to ruin the magic for the listener, but yes, these videos are not being recorded daily and dropped the following day. I recorded them over the summer, just knowing knowing my schedule and life being what it is, I was like, there's no way I'm going to try to jam these out within October. So yeah, I recorded them over the summer, so they're done.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just the only way I could reasonably get through not just the research and the compilation and everything, but also the troubleshooting. There's so much, with video games, with this software from so many different periods and platforms, there's just, for each game, there's a certain amount of troubleshooting required just to get it up and running.
Yeah,
so I had to account for all of these different factors, and I realized, no, I'm just going to start in the middle of the summer. I think on some of the videos I'm sweating because I'm recording during the day, and you see me mopping my brow because it's just super hot that day that I'm recording. But
there you go.
But yeah, that was definitely the process I had to follow. It's cool though because I've spent the time since then actually playing those top 10 games so that I can finish them by October. So I'm just finishing, I think the final game, a game called The Wanderer: Frankenstein's Creatures, my final game on that list that I think starting to play today. As a game that I'll actually want to finish and play all the way through.
Okay.
And then for the listener, you're not going to see me, my first playthrough of this game, I think that game's from 2019, so that video won't drop for a few weeks yet.
Okay.
There you go.
But I guess look forward to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've been enjoying them so far, so I'm looking forward to doing all the rest of them.
Isn't it interesting how so many of the early ones were just text adventures? Do you think that speaks to more of the technology at the time, or do you think that was more of, this is a literary creation, let's kind of keep it a little bit more literary?
I think it's both.
Okay.
Because I suppose you could have made a Pac-Man clone with Frankenstein somehow. It's possible. They had graphics, they had art that could have been used to make a Frankenstein game. But yeah, some of those early ones, the text adventures, I think because of the literary pedigree, I'm sure you have people like me, frankly, who would think oh no, you have to respect the source material. You have to honor Mary Shelley's work and try to make a literary experience out of this thing.
Right.
And some of them did. Like I said, those text adventures are the ones where they are more wordy. You are reading a lot more. That number one game I named, the Frankenstein Wars, that's pretty much all reading, except for an occasional cool piece of art in the mix. So yeah, I think some developers definitely had that in mind. But you do get some maybe not Pac-Man, but some experiences or games that are basically that, Frankenstein 2000 on the ZX Spectrum. I think that was from '85, and that one is, those graphics are Atari as heck. They're just super high contrast, super simple little visuals floating around. That one is on my top 10 list though, because I enjoyed the premise so much of you're a little it's basically a Fantastic Voyage, I think is what it's called. It's the story where you are in a ship and you get shrunk down and you have to go into someone's body and explore. You fly through their blood vessels and their brain and stuff, and that's the premise of this game. So it's barely Frankenstein related because it could have been anything, or it could have been any corpse, I guess, but they decided put Frankenstein in it so we could put it in the title maybe.
Right.
But yeah, you get games like that where some developers were just trying to make fun action games out of Frankenstein, which I think the source material does lend itself to that. What do you guys think? Because I was thinking it kind of is an adventure story. There's a lot of traveling. There are action sequences, the whole thing where he's climbing onto the glacier. It feels like they're going to have a fight. They're both circling each other in the snow kind of thing. So I think the book does set itself up for these kinds of action experiences as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, then once you get into the movies, there's so much. We especially we always talked about in the Hammer movies, particularly that version
of Frankenstein.
Yeah, he's standing on the back of a wagon, standing up, whipping two horses, in a high-speed chase in a carriage. They're definitely leaning into that kind of thing. And then in more recent years, you have stuff like I, Frankenstein and stuff that are just straight up action movies and stuff. I don't know.
Wait, what is this tool horse cart? What is that? What movie is that?
I'm trying to remember. It's one of the Hammer movies with Peter Cushing as Victor Frankenstein.
It was the second one, right? The horror, was it the horror Frankenstein?
It might have been, but yeah, he's chasing somebody down, and he's standing up on a wagon that's being pulled by two horses, and he's got whips in both hands, just dual wielding. Yeah, it's wild.
Well, heck, in the first one,
incredible.
He makes his escape on horseback as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, did he? Because I did watch the first horror movie, or the Hammer movie rather, because I know those are a big deal in the Frankensteiniverse. So I thought, well, I should watch at least the first one.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, because I know that's its own series, right? Like the Hammer horror people like made their own Frankenstein universe, and it goes off into strange and interesting places.
Yeah. So
cool.
I should reiterate, he makes his escape until he doesn't escape and gets caught at the very, yeah. Because there is that scene.
But yeah, the Hammer ones are interesting. I mean, the Universal ones, you're following the monster. There's various mad scientists coming in and out.
Yeah.
The Hammer one switches the perspective to focusing on Victor Frankenstein. So he's making a different monster in every movie, basically. But it's always Peter Cushing as Victor Frankenstein through the whole series. So
is it not Christopher Lee as the creature every time? Like
no, he's just in the first
one.
one. Yeah, and then there's one where he revives a woman. So that's
Frankenstein
one
creates
called
a woman.
Yeah. So you have, but that one, it's like that one's got some interesting stuff. When we talked about it, he puts a man's brain in a woman's body.
Right, her boyfriend's brain in her body.
And so there's some like weird, you saying you're into gender flip stuff. There's a lot about that where it's like it's almost a trans narrative, but not quite. And so there's just some really interesting stuff. Is like, you've got this monster trying to figure out who they are and what this body is, and when you add gender into the mix, it further complicates it in some fun ways.
Oh, that's great. That's I don't know, with a story this old that's been done so many times. I do always hope that some of these creators will do something different in some way. Like I just watched Frankenstein versus the Mummy because I'm watching all of the Terrifier movies this week, and that just popped up as one of Damien Leone's other works, and I thought like, oh, I'll squeeze it in. And even that one, well, the fact that it's according to I think Wikipedia or something, it's the first time Frankenstein has faced off against a mummy, so I guess that was noteworthy. But also the fact that in that, can I spoil with that movie? I don't know if it matters.
Yeah, of course. We already have done an episode on it, so surely everybody's.
Yeah, good point. This is old hat for your listeners. So yeah, just the fact that he found a brain to put in there in the end, but that person retained all their memories. It's the same guy. It's the same guy as himself. He remembers who he is, what's going on. So I thought that was a cool twist because most of them are like. I do always wonder, like, there was someone in that brain before it got put into this new creature. Wouldn't some of that still linger, like, in terms of specific memories? So it was cool that in this one, Damien Leone just said, no, it's the same guy. He didn't forget a thing. And he's going to still be a bastard to everyone around him.
Right, of course.
Yeah, they definitely play around with that a lot, like, and obviously different versions have done it different ways, but, I'm surprised how infrequently you have a new brain equaling like that personality going into the body. Universal even tried that very briefly. There's the one movie where Igor's brain gets put into the monster's body, and at the very end of the movie, the monster speaks with Igor's voice, and then you go to credits, and so then the next movie comes out, and it's like, is it going to be Igor? And it's not. They just kind of like did away with that.
Right. Well, the plan was that it would be Igor, but they decided that was a dumb idea, I guess, which, I disagree.
Yeah. Actually, one of the games that I just finished does this too, and that's one of the noteworthy games. It's Frankenstein Through the Eyes of the Monster. It's the one with Tim Curry in it, and that's the reason. That is why I played it, because I was like, it's got Tim Curry. Yeah. I have to finish this game. But the protagonist, the player is the creature, is the protagonist of the story, but it is someone who was revived, basically. So they're still the same person, and you remember this character remembers their past lives and what's going on, and that ties into the story. But yeah, it was interesting to see that in that game as well. Like, oh, they're just like I guess maybe it's easier to get the player up to speed, because if your memory's been wiped and you're starting from like where some of the creatures start as like a very like child level or in terms of what they're capable of. And I guess for this game, they just need the player to start roaming around and exploring, so they figured like he knows who he is. There's no mystery here about the past of this character.
So you're doing you did these all in like chronological order roughly. Like, did you notice any sort of like trends where like when we got to the 70s this started happening, or I guess not the 70s, 80s, 90s, but like are there patterns like that like games kind of like start focusing on a specific thing at a specific time?
Well, I think the patterns are pretty clear because it's based on what's popular at the time. Like we talked about text adventures in the 80s. That was the thing to do at the time. Then you move on to 2D platformers starting in the late 80s and up to the mid 90s. So that's where you get like your Dr. Franken series, Decap Attack, which we talked about, just because that's what consoles of the time could do. Like you could, and 2D platformers sold. So I think all these developers thought like, well, that's what the kids are buying. So, and I say kids, but you know, anyone who's into games, that's what they're buying right now. So, so that was the trend of the time. Then we get to 95, and that's where we start to get more adventure-y type games. Oh, and actually in 94, we even get a fighting game. One of the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein adaptations, based on the movie from Kenneth Branagh, they decided we're going to make. It starts off as an adventure game. You are the creature. You're exploring. You're clicking on things. You're collecting inventory items. But then someone thought we need action in this game, so they turned it into a Street Fighter-like fighting game. It's the one time you see this in a Frankenstein game. So there you go. That was the trend at the time. Fighting games were huge, and they thought, like, there you go. That's how we can get some action sequences into this game. Very clumsy fighting at best. That one is super rough. I don't know if that video dropped yet. I forget. But
yes,
it did. Okay,
I watched that this morning and I cracked it. Like you have the monster and Frankenstein, face. It looks like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. Like, fight, and then they go at each other. It was just so funny to see that.
And maybe I suck. Maybe I'm not good at this game. But he kicked my ass. Frankenstein, the doctor, kicked my ass every single time. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's the first fight of the game. I am the creature who I believe universally is portrayed as having more strength and agility and stuff. So the fact that I'm getting my ass kicked by this like college student basically is like, come on. Come on, guys.
Yeah, that's a joke, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Fair enough.
But then there's also, I call this out in the videos because it still blows my mind. There's this weird gap from 95 to 04 where there's no trend because there were no Frankenstein games in that period. Obviously, this is not a series controlled by any one entity, so it's not like anyone got together and said we're going to stop making Frankenstein games. Companies just gave up on Frankenstein, which I will blame on that 94 movie. I think Frankenstein got saturation reached this point because I do know that Universal was bringing back Frankenstein as a nostalgia thing around then as well, like in the early to mid 90s. So I've been assuming that there was just a saturation point where there was too much Frankenstein, and all the companies just backed off. Even though it's free, I call this out a lot in the videos. Like, it's public domain. Right. Like you and I can make a Frankenstein game, and it could be anything we want. So, but yeah, for some reason they stopped, and then I don't think we see a game until 04, and then so we skip a bunch of trends, of course. And by that period, you'll see that's when we have like Newgrounds, and we have basically the capability for people to just kind of self-publish games. That becomes a thing in the 2000s. So that's when we start to see a lot more of not experimentation even. Just people were still making like 2D platformers, but now they're publishing them online instead of having to go through a Nintendo or what have you to get them published.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember that time. I was like, I was like in college at the time, and there were all kinds of just like silly sort of like flash games that people would make of varying degrees of complexity. Quality. Yeah.
So I got to ask this. So out of all the video games, I'm talking even like Darkstalkers, Monster in My Pocket, what is your absolute favorite version of the Frankenstein monster?
In video games.
In video games.
Specifically.
Yeah.
Oh, where did they do a really good job with it? Oh, I'm going to go back to the Frankenstein Wars. Now, this is a game, how much... Well, this is not a spoiler. It's the basic setup of the game. The premise of that game, or the story in there, is that the technology to reanimate life has gotten out. So there's like Frankenstein has created this technology. It's been leaked, basically. It's gotten out into the world, and now like the governments of like France and England use it to reanimate their soldiers. So you end up with soldiers who go out and fight, and then you have these guys who are lugging like reanimation machines on their shoulders. Right. And when they see a dead guy, they'll stop there, reanimate the soldier, and he just gets up and he's like, "Oh, I'm good. Okay, cool." And he keeps on fighting. But then you have this like not separate human species, but like basically you have these people who have been reanimated, and they're called like Lazarins. And so that's the setup of the game, is that there's this technology is just out there, and people are getting reanimated left and right. So the player character is not the creature created by Frankenstein. You're one of the soldiers, and you get involved in the war, etc., and stuff happens. But the creature created by Frankenstein is in that, and he's I guess the SAS didn't exist at the time, but he's basically like a spy working for England, and he's this like badass super spy guy creeping around, getting into fights. You fight him at one point because you're also like a Lazarin now, and you have some ability to take him on. And it's like the coolest version of Frankenstein, basically. I liked the story in general. I like what they did with the idea of this technology. But then the way they portray the monster, which I think he names himself Adam. Adam, I think we've seen in other stories, that name Adam just is a good name for a new being, a new creation. So I think he takes on the name of Adam, and he just, it's portrayed really well. He's a really cool, like, sleek spy type. And just also the idea that he's still around, and he's like, I don't know if he's happy. I don't know if being a soldier for England is a good thing or a happy thing, but it's cool. I like the idea that he's still around, I guess, because so many, like we talked about, like the book is miserable, like no one, I don't know if I don't think he dies at the end explicitly, but it's not like a happy ending, I don't think.
Yeah,
so it's cool that in this story they supposed, like, well, he's still around, and he found a purpose in life, and he's kind of out there fighting the good fight, so to speak. So I really liked how they did it in that game.
That's cool. Can I open up the door and say, is this your favorite interpretation out of all media, or do you have a more preferred version?
It's tough because, hold on, let me look at the movie list one more time. Okay. Was there any other movie adaptation? Rocky Horror Picture Show, Dr. Frankenfurter's pretty good. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I guess he's not the creature, but in terms of like adapting the Frankenstein narrative into something else, like Rocky Horror Picture Show is really fun and really good. So I think that might stand above that video game. Let's say Rocky Horror Picture Show, for the movies anyway, let's say that's my favorite. And then for the video games, it's the Frankenstein Wars.
Okay. Solid.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if you all have read this one book, if I can name drop this. It's a book called The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein.
Yes. It's a good one.
Beyond the original book by Mary Shelley, of the books I did read beside that one really stood out because I loved how they reframed it all, and it makes sense in terms of how Victor is behaving, how Elizabeth, is behaving, and like recontextualizing it all from her perspective, and then continuing the story a bit further.
Yeah,
I loved that book. It was really good. I enjoyed just the shift to someone else, like we talked about before. Like I like the original story, but anytime we can shift to someone else or change it a little bit in an interesting way, I love it. So yeah, that was a good book too.
Yeah, that is. We ended up doing like I think 4 or 5 episodes on that on our Patreon, just because like there was so much in there to talk about. Yeah. I just really loved the way that it really like established Victor as an unreliable narrator. Everything that happened in Mary Shelley's novel, Victor's telling us that. So if there's discrepancies between, Elizabeth's version of the story and Victor's, it's not that one of these is the right story or the wrong story. It's just the way that
their point of view,
their point of view of it. It establishes all sorts of motivations for what Elizabeth is doing in the original novel that make more sense for a woman who's, in sort of, a rough situation where she's just trying to, find the best way to survive and thrive in a society that's not really built for her.
Right. And especially whenever she's like, yeah, come back or don't, it's like, eh.
That's where I was bummed with the games, because I'm a stats nerd, so I did make a bunch of pie charts and stats, because with 85 games, I realized like, oh, this is data. Yeah. I could get meaningful data out of this much information. So I did do a stats breakdown just to see like, okay, how often was somebody the protagonist and the antagonist and stuff. And I was bummed that Elizabeth and the bride are almost never featured as a protagonist, and I was just disappointed. That's me pointing my finger at all game developers of the past many decades, like, you all let me down. You could have done more.
Do better, guys.
But yeah, Elizabeth shows up like once as a protagonist in one of the games, and the bride, I think, also shows up like once in one of the games. So, what are you going to do? Yeah, I'm sure they I'm sure when you're making like an action game or something, or like these developers just didn't have these characters in mind as like, oh, who would be a cool protagonist. And then sometimes it would just be like somebody I labeled some guy. Like it's just not somebody from the book. It's not somebody we have to care about. It's just a rando they put into the place of the player character.
Yeah.
So I'll admit, I've only gotten up to 92 on your videos, but I am going to finish them off. My question now is, has Clerval ever been the protagonist in any of the games you've played?
Clerval, I think once.
Really? Okay.
I think there's one of the later itch.io like interactive fiction stories that are played like in a browser.
Gotcha.
I think they do. The creator did think like, well, what if same thing? What if we recontextualize from that perspective just to see what other choices the player can make to change the story? So it's like, instead of just automatically hating the creature, like what if you try to be friendly, etc. So I think it shows up one time.
Okay. Anthony knows this one's coming next, so I'm just going to fire it off. What about Ernest? What about Ernest Frankenstein, the forgotten Frankenstein?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I agree. This is the forgotten character that I wish that we would at least get a book about, something, because that kid gets sent off to military school, or I forget what it is, and then that's it. And no one cares anymore what happens to Ernest. No, Ernest does not show up in any of the games. I guess you could project that one of the randos that are put into some of the games could be Ernest. There are many games where you are a like descendant of Frankenstein. I don't know how often this pops up in movies or other stories, but there are several of these where it's like, oh well, we're gonna send someone back to the castle. Why don't we make them a descendant of Frankenstein who has to like kill their ancestors' creation because it's causing problems, or they just inherit the castle and they have to go back and deal with stuff back there.
Yeah, honestly, that's a surprising theme in a lot of Frankenstein media, as a descendant of Frankenstein who's returning.
So I'm guessing the main two protagonists are the monster and Victor. Did you see, like, is one more prevalent than the other? Are you seeing like, the monster, you're the monster fighting off Victor, or are you're Victor fighting the monster? Like, which direction is it more common?
Well, the creature is tied with some guy with 29% of the video games featuring them as protagonists, or rather, each of them. So 60% of these games feature the creature as the protagonist character, or just some rando, somebody who is not from the book. And then the creator meaning, the doctor, because sometimes they're not named Frankenstein, you know how it is, they'll just try to change names around, but so I just called them the creator. And then they're in second place at like 23% of the games, featuring the creator as a protagonist. And those are often the ones where the goal is like to reanimate the creature. Like sometimes, especially in the older titles, you're playing as like a little guy who has to run around collecting bones and hearts and arms. Like you're collecting the parts that you will use to reanimate the creature. And oftentimes that's when you are playing as a creator. If not the creator, you're playing as the assistant. So whether they are named Igor, or it's just somebody who's helping the mad scientist, the goal will always be just like, run around, find the body parts, and return them back to the lab to do the thing.
That feels about right, like ratio-wise. That like people want to be the monster, that people sympathize with him and want to like experience the world through his eyes more than anything else, and then the other thing being the creator trying to actually put it together. That seems like what I would have guessed that would be the two most prevalent sort of configurations of these games.
Those early games don't go there in terms of like, all right, you have the parts, now you're going to sit here and like be a surgeon and put these things together. They wouldn't go that far, but then the later games, the more experimental ones on itch.io especially, they go there. There are several games that are just like, all right, you're going to sit here now with like a body on a table, and you're going to like sew the arm and the heart, and you're going to put the brain into the brain case and stuff. So eventually we do get, I guess for any player or anyone who wants that, like, no, I just want the surgery. That's what I'm into when it comes to Frankenstein is the assembly process. Then some of the later games will provide that as well.
So let's say, all right, let's have a hypothetical here. All right, I'm going to give you an infinite amount of cash. I want you to design your favorite Frankenstein, or your version of the Frankenstein game. What does that look like?
I thought about this because I do work in video games, except I'm more of a producer manager type. So, but I have been recently getting into game development, like making a game, like using Unreal or something, the Unreal Engine. And so I've thought about this. What I want to see, what I did not see in the games that I wish I had seen, is a cinematic platformer. Mm-hmm. Are you all familiar with like a game called Another World,
yep.
Or Limbo or Inside? These sorts of like they're 2D platformers.
They're artistic and they have
on a basic level they're just a 2D platformer, but they get much more like cinematic. That's what they're called cinematic platformers. They're slower paced. Mm-hmm. They kill you a lot. That's one of the features for some reason, is like they enjoy. I don't know if they enjoy it, but they like to show the player dying in various nasty ways.
Yeah, like so chased by giant shadow spiders and stabbed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like just being very well animated, very slow paced. And I thought, like, yeah, a game where, like, say the player is the creature, and it begins when you wake up, or rather when the creature wakes up, and you have to just kind of figure out the world, and the beginning of that story for the creature is just confusion and running and being chased and harassed and pushed off into the woods. So I thought, like, yeah, cinematic platformer, beautifully animated, slow paced, minimal dialogue too. And there are some games that do this in a different genre, like The Wanderer, the Frankenstein's creature, that game from 2019. Mm-hmm. They do explore like the creature waking up and getting to know the world and experiencing senses and stuff. But it's done in a different genre. It's like a overhead view adventure style. So my idea is, much more like cinematic platformer, slower paced, and minimal dialogue, just to kind of like showcase, because I don't believe, the creature doesn't talk for a while. So I think it would be a cool way to, it's built into that, because so many video games are about you start off at level 0, you're weak, you don't have any abilities, and you end up at level 100, and you're the master of the universe.
Right.
It's a video game. You're the center of the universe. It's how it is. Mm-hmm. So a video game version of that with the creature starting at that level 0 and working their way up, learning about the world, learning new abilities, learning to communicate. Maybe that's how you finally get dialogue, is when you can actually talk, and that becomes integrated somehow. So yeah, if I had the budget and a team, that's totally the kind of game I think I would make.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I have played Limbo. I think before we started recording, I was saying that I'm not a huge gamer, that Eric definitely plays a lot more than me, but that game is beautiful, and I could definitely see that kind of style and that tone working really well.
What about you all? Like, I didn't ask you the quintessential podcast question of your histories with Frankenstein video games. Like, if you'd played any, if there's any like genre you'd love to see these games in.
So before you sent us the list of everything, I had never played any Frankenstein games at all. I don't know, I just had not crossed my mind that they would be out there. I knew that there were some like tabletop games, and like Eric and I have talked about doing some of those for the show at some point. But like, I had never. When you sent that list, I went through. I played a couple of the more recent ones, which were, I think, a lot of the ones that were on itch.io, that were a little bit more text based and stuff. But I'm excited. Like, after having watched these first 9 episodes, like, I do want to go back and play some of these games. They look, some of them look maybe too challenging for me, but they do look fun to kind of fool around in for a little bit at least. I don't know if Eric, have you played any before recently?
So most of the games that I've played that have involved the Frankenstein monster have been where he's part of an ensemble, like Darkstalkers,
sure.
Monster in My Pocket, things like that. And I probably do like Victor from Darkstalkers probably the best, just because like he took the name of his creator and he's the big buff guy that slams everybody around.
Oh yeah, that character's great. Yeah. I love that design too. It's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, all the character, that series, a fighting game series, for anyone not familiar, it's just monsters who are fighting.
Yeah.
And it's done in that beautiful Capcom mid-90s style where they're all stylized and big and hulking. Yep. Depending on the character, they're not all big hulking characters, but yeah, that one's really good. Cool. Yeah, that's a good choice. I should note too, Darkstalkers is not going to be on this list because I did explicitly exclude ensemble pieces. Mm-hmm. There's so many stories where Frankenstein's just one of many characters in the story. And I thought, like, man, if I have to expand to include all those games, I'm just going to be here for years. So, I did explicitly say, like, all right, no ensemble pieces. Frankenstein, the character or the story or the theme has to be the central part of it. And then that's how I was able to kind of get my list of 85 is by focusing just on that.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've run into doing the show is, like, you know, there's already plenty of just straight up Frankenstein movies, but as we've, like, you know, branched out a little bit, you know, like we watched the Hotel Transylvania movies, and, like, you know, the Frankenstein monster in that is a minor character compared to, like, the Dracula family, but you know, we're just trying to do this for as long as it's fun, so
stretch it out.
Yeah, so but yeah, I can imagine that, you know, if you found 85 games that are that specifically focused on the Frankenstein monster, that I'm sure if you start looking at the you know, outside of or the ensemble pieces, yeah, I can imagine that could get, you know, you're not trying to do the Frankencast, you're doing you know, extended series about specific titles and then moving on. So yeah, you would be stuck forever if you tried to do all the little minor things.
You're doing 1 month of this, right? So I mean, that would take up forever.
Yeah, exactly. I would say everything I do is a limited series, but I will say, if someone's listening to this and you think you have a YouTube channel where you can play all of the games ever featuring Frankenstein, again, subscribe. I will be there from day one, because that's exactly the kind of thing I would watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing.
You don't usually do daily forever, right? This is like you do like, do you have like weekly? Is that your normal pace, or do you kind of just like do a series and then take a break and then pick up a new series?
Yeah, basically the latter. It is a hobby. It's not something I'm trying to, like, you know, I'm not too interested in, like, having my channel blow up and get a million subs.
Yeah.
So if that happens, it's cool. I'll take it. But
yeah.
But yeah, it's a hobby. So I just kind of take it, you know, in stride, and I'll just pick a series of something that I like, and I'll spend a few months, like when I did Goosebumps, I spent a few months just reading all the books before I even played any of the games. So yeah, there's no regular schedule. I'll just kind of hop in and out. You'll just see me show up one day, and then when I do show up, it'll be like a week or two of daily drops, and then I'll disappear again for months before the next series. So yeah, it's pretty irregular scheduling, but you know, that's a hobby for you. You just kind of do it as life allows.
Right.
Yeah, I did see that you did the Goosebumps ones, and I haven't gotten to watch any of those, but I am a huge Goosebumps fan as well, so I'm definitely excited to get into those, because those are also, again, not being a big video game person, I didn't even realize there were any Goosebumps video games, so I'm excited to see what those are about.
I was such an annoying little kid. Like, literally every week I feel like they dropped, or every other week, and I was right there in the bookstore, like, here's my money, give me the book.
Yeah.
Or like once a month, maybe.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, so I just described how I kind of want to make a Frankenstein game now that I've played them all. After the Goosebumps series, the videos, I thought, like, I want to write these. So I started writing them. I just started writing, like, little, like, R.L. Stine style Goosebumps ripoffs aimed at kids, at that demographic. And I just started doing it. So that's, again, another... So once again, if it takes me 6 months before another video series drops, it's probably because I was over here writing my own little Goosebumps series in my spare time.
That's cool.
That's amazing. Yeah. So are you?
We need more.
Do you have plans for them, or are you just like doing them for fun, or?
Just for fun, just like the videos. It's just for fun, and then when I have maybe 20 of them, then I can maybe like start asking around, like, hey, I have 20 of these. What do I do with them? Does anyone know? And I'll see how it goes. But for now, it's totally for fun.
Yeah.
Like like I don't know how else to say it. Like, I suddenly, because in my 20s, you know, I was very serious-minded about writing, so I kind of had that in my brain already from back in the day. But then I dropped it for a long time. It was just not something I had it for a while. Then I fell off that wagon, and then after these books, I was like, oh, writing can be fun. It doesn't have to be angsty, you know, stuff you would write in your 20s. That has to be serious, and you want to be taken seriously. So you're writing about, like, life and serious things. And then when I read those Goosebumps books, I'm like, oh, they can just be fun, goofy, dumb books. And again, because we just did Frankenstein, I'm totally going to write one of those. I'm just going to.
There you go.
I don't know what it'll be. I'll see what I can come up with. But some Frankensteinian type Goosebumps book, I think, would be fun.
Oh wow! Yeah,
I want to read that.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to see that. So surprisingly, I think there might be. The original run of Goosebumps, there was never a Frankenstein one. I think there might have been one in like Goosebumps 2000 or something, like one of the later series when I was like older and didn't, wasn't reading them anymore, which is like wild. There's just not, not an R.L. Stine Frankenstein story that I have read.
And after reading the books, I do respect Stine for. Or his ghostwriters, there's much speculation about what was really going on with 12 books a year. Like, but anyway, yeah, I respected the author for not just doing the go-tos, like for example, like skipping Frankenstein completely for the entire original run, and when there was a vampire story, it's also like a time travel story, like these mashups. Mm-hmm. Like anytime he did like one of those classic monsters. He would also figure out how to mash it up with some other concept, just to not have it be those stories again. Mm-hmm. I think I'm sure that's why what was appealing maybe to the readers as well, and I was reading them, so to me as well. Mm-hmm. It's just that it wasn't just a story you knew; it was kind of mixing things up a little bit, for better or worse. Those books were not all successful. Some of them were definitely like, not so good here. But yeah, so yeah, much respect to him for skipping it completely. But I think eventually. There's one with like a dog that gets reanimated or something. I think that might be the Frankenstein story he decides to tell down the line.
Yeah, I think that is the one. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm pretty sure that's the one I was thinking of. That's like, the original run is like almost 70 books or something, and it came after that. I've read that original batch, but that's as far as I ever read. But I definitely do want to track down both the dog one and. Definitely would be interested in seeing what you come up with when you get to it.
Absolutely.
That'll be yet another persona. That'll be some pen name, so that anyone who knows me from any of these things, that'll be a whole different name, and they won't be able to find me. I love it. But I'll let you know. I'll make sure you all get the word.
Yeah. Whenever a mysterious persona emails us with news about it, we'll definitely share it with the world.
Right. Exactly.
Cool.
So let's talk about the takeaway. Out of all of these games, do you have something that like you'd say is the main theme of all of them, aside from reanimation?
Well, what's on my mind right now, I didn't plan for this, but as I was playing my top 10, I realized like I am escaping a lot of castles. The developers really got it into their heads, maybe as a necessity of having to develop levels and flesh out a space that the player can explore. They all, actually, I'm sure this comes from the movies as well, they all really lean into like the Frankenstein castle. And I know, I've seen this, talked about in Frankenstein circles, like on Tumblr and stuff. People point out like, there's no castle in that book. Right. There's no Frankenstein. At best, there's like a mansion, I guess, that they live in a fancy house, a big house, but it's not a castle. And I know the movies very clearly do have like big stonework castles, and I'm sure that's where it comes from. But yeah, playing through these games, I'm just like, man, I've been escaping castles for like 2 months now. What's going on here? Like, so yeah, that seems to be that's one takeaway at least is, yeah, these developers were just like, we need to. I guess maybe as a limitation, they were like, we have to enclose the player somewhere. We can't have them exploring a big world because it's not possible for us to do that in the 90s, maybe. Right. So let's just come up with an enclosed space like a castle, and the player is stuck in there, and you have to run around until you can, get to the end of the story. So yeah, there's a lot of castles you have to escape. I was surprised that we didn't have the surgery stuff, like the doctoring aspect of the story until much later, until those like indie devs on itch.io could just kind of do whatever they want. There's no publisher telling them like, nobody wants to play this. So it took a while, but I was just surprised that those early devs ignored that completely. Maybe it's too gruesome. Like maybe if you have to get an ESRB rating, where the like assembling body parts is just not something it's gonna be like an M rating automatically or something. Right. So that might be why we didn't see that too much of that till later. But yeah, those are some of the big ones. And beyond that, it's just it's such a big span of time and such a broad array of different developers and companies that it's just tough to like narrow it down, because there was no overriding voice behind these things. It was just like each company and each developer deciding independently what they would do with it. But yeah, so too many castles. That's my takeaway.
Too many castles. I like it.
Ooh, I have a question for you. What was the name of that Thieves, the FMV game?
Oh, Amityville Frankenstein or Fiendish Thieves.
Did you come across Fiendish Thieves in the process of going through these games?
So what is that full title one more time?
Well, it's called Fiendish Thieves on Steam.
Oh.
But the movie, that basically takes from what I understand, the FMV and makes Amityville Frankenstein.
We watched this movie a couple of weeks back.
It's not good at all.
I think it's the worst movie I've ever seen. It's certainly the worst movie we've done for the podcast. And the premise of the movie is you have a guy watching a movie, and we're watching him watch the movie, and the movie that he's watching is just FMV scenes from this game called Fiendish Thieves. And the game looks like it's really poorly lit. It just everything about it looks bad, and it's incredibly frustrating. But that it's thieves who break into like an old warehouse and end up running into a Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, and they're stealing a watch for some reason. I don't know why.
I can't imagine that the game is worth your time in any way. We only watched the movie, but I was just curious to see if you had stumbled across it, because it was excruciatingly bad.
Oh, it begins. I talked about this on at least one video. I fully expect that this will start to happen, where I was claiming that I've played them all, but realistically, there's no way I could have possibly found every Frankenstein game out there, like this example. And the other catch, of course, is if the term Frankenstein is missing from the description or the title, it's going to very easily slip through my searching fingers. So hey, here we go. This is the first one. You said it's not worth my time. It's absolutely worth my time.
Okay.
I don't care what people think about any of these games, any judgments about the quality or whatever. I will play them all. I happily invite people to hit me up on comments or anything, because if I missed one, I should know about it, because my brain will not permit me. I'll come up with a new list of the ones I missed, which I've already been doing. I did the Dr. Slump anime series. I claimed that I played them all, and somebody came out and emailed me and said, "Oh, you missed 5 of them."
Oh.
So I was like, "Oh crap! Oh well, that's a new video. Let me do a follow-up video where I play the ones I missed." So yeah, it's cool. Fiendish Thieves. I'll jot that down and I'll make sure to play it.
Oh, our apologies. That we
Hopefully the game is much better than the movie. I think the problem with the movie is that they were using this footage from a game to make the most low-budget movie they possibly could, to just sell, ads on Tubi or whatever, and it's real bad. But yeah, I would definitely be curious if you play the game. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it once you do.
Oh yeah.
Well, I will also watch the movie because they're related. So
don't do that.
No, I've locked it in. It's going to happen.
All right.
But yes, I'll let you know what I think.
Right.
But no, that's cool though. I totally welcome anyone who comes in oh, you missed this and that, and if there's a whole movie universe with tie-in games, then sure, I'll check that out too.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I feel like we're getting close to the end here, but we definitely want to give you some space here to promote your channel and anything else you've got where people can find you online. Anything you want to share?
Yeah. So the channel is NoiseLandCo. That's NoiseLandCo. It's one word. That's on YouTube. That's where I post all these videos where I talk about just all sorts of video games across all sorts of different source materials. Cartoons, books, what's the wildest thing? Toys, Mighty Max. I covered the Mighty Max games, and that was a toy line.
Heck
so
yeah.
All sorts of things. That's where the channel is. And then, I guess the other interesting thing you might want to check out is that book called Bart versus My Hopes and Dreams. It's a Simpsons video game retrospective. I sell that on itch.io, but it's also linked through the YouTube channel. So if you hop on there and click on the links section, you'll see all that stuff, and you can check it out.
Awesome.
And thanks to you all for having me. It's been fun. This is a great chat. And like I said, I've been a listener for a while, especially recently with all these movies I watched. It's this experience where when I find a movie and I find you all covered it, it's just really cool. Oh, I get to listen to the episode after the movie. So thank you all for that.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for listening, and thanks for joining us here. We were talking a little bit online, and then I was like, hey, that could be kind of interesting. Let's see if you want to drop in and talk games. So I'm glad we were able to get this put together because it's been fun.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I was blessed.
All right, where can they find us, Anthony?
So you can find us on all the socials at the FrankenCast. You can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. We're also on YouTube, although maybe a little less exciting. We do have all of our audio over there that you can check out. You can also find us at patreon.com/thefrankencast, where we've got all kinds of additional content. That's, as we kind of discussed a few times in here, that's where we talk more about books and offshoot stuff. We may end up playing a game or two and talking about them on there. Who knows? But we're always trying to find new stuff over there.
Yeah, and a couple things on TikTok, but that's all. I need to get my butt in gear, so we'll do that.
Yeah, we're working on that as well. So yeah, just find us wherever, search the FrankenCast. We're all over the place.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Well then, to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The FrankenCast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velasquez. Follow us on Twitter at The FrankenCast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.
I heard the song kick in right after you said that. That's so cool. It's that, the parasocial thing is there, but yeah, it's, you listen to the episodes long enough, you expect these sound cues at each point along the way.